Welcome to the Healing Law Podcast, where we talk about all things health, law, and nature, featuring a wide and diverse range of thinkers, from business leaders, activists, philosophers, even doctors, lawyers, and if we can never get a police officer on here to share their side of the story, that would be awesome too. For some reason, they're very hesitant to. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can email us at guest@healinglaw.com. Looking for anyone to share their unique perspective based on the conversations put forth herein. Now, you can also support the show at paypal.me/healinglaw. Link in the description. I'm your host, Douglas, and today I want to introduce myself and the show. Over the years with healinglaw.com, I've had a lot of people reach out to me wanting to share their stories and unique perspectives and their experiences with the legal system and court battles and First Amendment auditors, all kinds of people, police officers, all sorts of things. And I began that whole pursuit of healinglaw.com, back in Occupy. They had this whole Proposition 37 came out right after Occupy Wall Street, right? It was about the right to know what's in your food you eat, whether it's genetically modified or not, because corporations figured out they can genetically modify your corn and soybeans and all sorts of food, and then they can own the patent, right? Something they couldn't own in nature. They've made it their own somehow. And I noticed that back then, and it really stood out to me. So I continued to look into that, right? And for a time, I kind of turned away from it because nobody seemed to pay attention. The whole thing got shut down by Monsanto's overfunding. And eventually they went to other states, and they eventually said, yeah, we're going to label GMOs. And 10 years later, they come up with this bioengineered language. Everything changed into what is now like CRISPR technology, wherein they can just edit things without using the virus as the intermediate, like to insert the genetic code. Instead, they have new technologies for this now. And of course, we know this was a big thing with the mRNA vaccines, right? They're not editing your DNA, but it's mRNA. It's a genetic code, right? If you step back and you look at all this information about the health system, originally I wanted to just look at health and natural healing and why the medical system's so corrupt. And eventually, you see that there's laws in place like the FDA and how they regulate medicine and all these things that really hinder actual healing in people. They treat the symptoms, not the causes, right? You hear that said all the time now. And ultimately, I kind of am proposing a theory here, ultimately, and it kind of, the whole show and all the guests, which I already have so many amazing guests lined up. This came from a podcast experience I had recently on the Secret Experts podcast, where they interviewed me, and it was a great interview. And I was going back through their older interviews, and they had Dr. Peter McCullough talking about the mRNA vaccines and all this, and the long COVID and all this. Very interesting conversation. I encourage you to go check that out. And that got me thinking, I want to have conversations with these people. And, I can just make a podcast, which I've had this in my head for at least 7 years, I'd say. The Healing Law Podcast. I've even started it before, but never really committed to it. But now I see I've stepped back and I kind of see a perspective that I want to lay forth. And to get there on my own is rather difficult. As you can see, I kind of go all over the place. That's why I'm going to rely on these amazing guests I got lined up. We have, I won't say too much here, but stay tuned. We have amazing, authors and activists already lined up, like unique people with awesome stories and perspective that should be heard, in my opinion. Ultimately, we see that the health system's not what it should be. The food supply is poisoned. And the law supports this because of, the way corporations run and capitalism and profit and all this. And that's not to shame all that, but it is the fruit of the tree, You should look at the fruits, and we can see what the fruits are, at least in the medical system. It's horrifying. There's no care or concern anymore. It literally is just about making money. And, they've been making some significant changes with Trump RX and all this to discount, pharmaceuticals and all this. And that's well and good, I suppose. But the reality is the pharmaceuticals are based on plants. Synthetic medicine came into play because of David Rockefeller and recognizing that he could make anything out of oil byproducts, right? And that began Rockefeller medicine, where they take oil byproducts because you get plastics and you get all these chemicals from it, but you can also make simple compounds that mimic that mimic the ones found in nature, because the structure of oil is the phenols of plants broken down. So they can reconstruct it into whatever form they want, and then they can put a patent on it, just like with the GMOs. You can see how this corporate influence is really destroyed medicine. I won't harp too long on the whole Rockefeller thing, but essentially he went around and realized he could make a lot of money by selling synthetic drugs they owned the rights to, the corporations owned the rights to, and they basically made natural medicine like a sham. Like they defamed it and went around the whole Flexner report and all this. I'm not going to get too deep into the history, but it's fascinating because you still see how that reflects today. And in my research and, discoveries over the years, I was a landscaper for a long time, focused on organic practices well before Roundup was known to cause cancer, and not using Roundup, like what can I use instead of it? And things like this. And what applications can we use that are organic for healthy soil and all this, healthy lawn without using all the synthetic pesticides and all this, and farming. And eventually I find fulvic acid. And that's kind of the cornerstone of what's enabling me to really focus on the topic, the whole thesis I'm laying out here. Because fulvic acid is kind of like oil, except for it's not broken down. It hasn't been carbonized. Oil is carbonized plant material, and fulvic acid is just really broken down, very small plant material. And just in understanding what it is, we can see how after something dies, the energy doesn't go, it doesn't disappear. It transfers through these exchanges found in the fulvic acid, and over time in all these elemental reactions. It's fascinating. But all this is to say that there is a record in the carbon base of the life. We are carbon-based life. And when carbon breaks down, right, in its structured form, we know it as graphite. And graphite is literally to write. We use it to write. But it's also the natural record of organic life. Every piece of information that ever goes through anything is exchanged to this carbon network. And you can see this in technology, where now there's always talk about graphene, which is essentially, it was discovered by taking pencil lead and tape and pulling the tape apart on the piece of pencil lead to get single atomic layers of graphite, and that's referred to as graphene. And this is the most effective thing that they've ever found for, as far as size and how strong it is and all this. It is the most effective means of transporting energy and information that is known. It's the only two-dimensional structure that we know that we can do this with. And that's why they want to interface it with the technology, because what we're seeing is they want their own traceable record, because they're mimicking the natural carbon record. And it's this whole overlay, this whole simulation being laid over top of it in the carbon record. And, it's a lot to suggest, and I don't really know what it means, to be honest with you, but it's just something I see happen, right? Because the tech companies are seeking to use carbon communication. I mean, that's where everything's shifting. It's going from, copper wires, where they had the electric back in the day. And now I don't really know what they use now, but I think like gold, and so it depends on what component, but they want to interlay graphene because it's basically invisible. That's the hardest part of working with it, is it's so tiny that you can't even really see it. So it's like it can overlay it over anything. It can be, it's flexible, it's strong. And that's the carbon exchange system, is what we exist in today. And you can see this, they want to trace the greenhouse gases and all this. And what does that mean? CO2, tracking carbon dioxide, which comes from life, living breathing organic life generates carbon dioxide as a natural byproduct. So they want to track that, right? They want to trace how many pounds of CO2 are being released over here, and they want to mitigate it, and because ultimately they want to see it all, because that's the record interface that all of this technology is kind of merging with. Now, where's technology coming from? Is it consciousness on its own? Is it alien technology? Is it Satan's little game? These are discussions that we're going to really break down and get into over time here, and break that down a bit, because I don't want to make too many claims, but there's something going on there that I want to get to the bottom of. Anyhow, it's kind of the overarching theme here. I said a lot without saying nothing to some people, and that's fine. But that's the whole point of this podcast, is to have conversations with the right guests and to generate an effective understanding of the medical system and society and laws, so that maybe we could better interact and engage with one another in the system in a respectful way. Now, what that looks like, I don't know. God, this place is crazy, man. This world is insane. It's all good. We're gonna have these conversations, and it's gonna be fun. This is the first episode here, just a little introduction, and the Healing Law podcast is sponsored by American Grit, Fulvic, and you can find that at operationamericangrit.com. We're going to be getting into fulvic acid and what it is, because it sits in the background of life. It is just like this carbon-based exchange. It is part of the carbon-based exchange, and it holds an electronic charge, and it passes it on from its form into life, into living forms, into organic bodies. So the carbon-based exchange it's exchanging active energy through the carbon exchange. And it doesn't transfer through a wire, right? It's sitting there in this charge, ready to go into the next thing, because that's how life decays. It doesn't, all this energy gets stored up, and it doesn't just disappear. The elements stay active. The fulvic acid is essentially, it's still active. It's bioavailable. It's bioactive. Whereas coal is a different form of the same thing, but it's lost its bioavailability. It creates poisons, and we create poisons with it because of, there's a lot to get into with the medical studies and the perspectives that they put forth, right? When they do studies, the doctor's bias or the studier's bias is going to limit the results. Whatever they're looking for, they're going to find or not find. And the same thing when we look at this technology, especially when it comes from the oil, which so much of our technology comes from, and so much of what surrounds us comes from oil, coal, and tar, and it's synthetically derived by people who have intentions to make money with a pharmaceutical drug that it makes them a lot of money. That maybe it mitigates a little bit of the problem that it's intended to, but it doesn't really fix it. The intentions of the creators of these synthetic drugs certainly play a role, and the whole perspective about how they're discovered and how they're made also plays a role. So it's not to say that synthetic drugs are always bad, but the intention matters. How they're made matters. How they're studied and researched matters. The whole comparison between how fulvic acid is like this living, bioactive, ancient compost that holds this charge, that is made of so many different plant compounds broken down that are still there, like polyphenols like resveratrol are just sitting in the soil for, they say, millions of years, if the conditions are right. And this whole relationship between the fulvic and the oil is fascinating, especially because there's studies with the waterways, and towns have found, I don't remember the specific area, but, official government studies about pouring fulvic acid into waterways that have been polluted with petrochemicals. And the fulvic acid just naturally absorbs them and reassimilates them into natural elements again that aren't harmful anymore. And it's almost as if whatever life is, knew that we would find this oil and poison our water and poison the air and poison everything with it. And then the whole time there's this fulvic acid sitting in the ground that helps us to understand that relationship from a different way and to even heal the damage that we've done to the environment by really just teaching us about our relationship to the environment a bit. And I know that might not stand out to most because most people haven't looked into this as much as I've nerded out about it. But when you really look at it, when you study its relationship in the carbon exchange ecosystem, it is this background substance that is ever present among all living things, just like the mycelium network. It's kind of just sitting in the background, exchanging organic carbon information. And is it conscious? I don't see, I don't know. That's not what I'm saying. But there appears to be it is active. It is part of this carbon exchange mesh. And there's many different versions of this. We can see it with the Wood Wide Web, like the mycelium networks. Again, they exchange sugars and all these things through the environment, the flora. They share sugars with one another, help one another out with nutrients through the fungal networks. Plants send nutrients to each other through them. And in that same way, there's all kinds of these systems that we haven't identified that are so subtle and operating in the background. And it's very interesting to see how the technology that we're creating reflects so precisely these naturally occurring systems. So, anyhow, that was dense. More than enough for an intro. Anyhow, we will be getting a few recordings done today, and I'll post them throughout the upcoming weeks here and get the ball rolling here. I think that's Oh, and you can also check out healinglaw.com. You can support the show there too. The Sefer Bibles. We don't have them in stock, though. Not many right now. We'll get them back soon. Speaking of which, we have some fascinating guests lined up. That's all. I'll leave it at that. Anyhow, this is episode 1 of the Healing Law Podcast. I'm your host, Douglas. I hope you all have an amazing day, and make sure you subscribe and check out the links in the description there. And interact, share this with your friends and whatnot.
When you walk out of here today, don't be afraid to remind our government that they work for us!
You must leave the area immediately. If you refuse to leave the area, you will be arrested for North Carolina General Statute. Under North Carolina General Statute.
But the fact of the matter is, it is not okay what you are doing, and the people are not intimidated.
If you have a good sheriff, however, they can stand in the gap.
You've got to be subject to the law, whether you have on blue jeans or blue uniforms. What is right is right is right.
I don't give a damn what it is. Because guess what? I'm ready to go to jail and die about it.
Think globally, act locally. We need to understand what the global agenda is, but we need to act locally to counter it. And we need to do it in a way that occupies peace. We need to do it in a way that is going to make connections with each other locally so that we see each other as human beings.
I'm going to leave you with 3 simple words: integrity, dignity, and community.
And a lot of people were seeing politics at that time, but I was seeing revival. Yes, revival was coming through the realm of politics.
Amen.
And that momentum and that movement is still in our country.
Yes, sir.
We just need to find avenues to harness it and where it's still. The move of God is strong in our nation today.
The Word of God teaches us in the book of Psalms. It says that if I had wings like a dove, then I would fly away and be at rest. It's released representing the soul of Andrew.
To get this into the public eye. We're trying to win this war, and we can't do it without your help.
And services, nope.